Welcome to day 8 of the Advent Stitch Along. Today we'll be switching back to color 433 to stitch our stable. We'll be using a satin stitch for the walls of the stable and then switching to a back split stitch to complete the roof. So let's get started. So we used a satin stitch earlier on this project whenever we stitched our sheep's heads, but this is a little bit of a larger space and we're not needing to do that share, tuck, split method. I got those words wrong. Straight, share, tuck method. And so I'm going to show you how to use that satin stitch in just a normal semi-rectangle shape. So let me show you. I'm going to start by splitting the piece right down the middle, and I'm going to start at the top, go down into the grass. Now, if you have a hard time knowing exactly where the middle of the piece is, feel free to kind of hold your floss down and give you an idea of where it is right in the middle so that you don't accidentally go a little too far to the left or to the right. You can even use your needle and kind of poke in there a little bit and kind of pre-make your hole if you feel like you need to do that. So I'm going to get as close to that grass as possible, and then I'm going to pull it down and try to avoid these little knots here. And you can use your needle like this to kind of help keep it nice and flat. So now I'm going to go to the left. Again, I'm always going to be at the top here, going down into the grass, trying to make sure we're always pulling our fabric and our floss in the same direction. I'm going to go right next to that first stitch I made. Again, we're not sharing a hole or anything, just going right next to it. So pretty much all this is just a series of straight lines filling in the whole space. So I'm going to keep doing that until I have filled in, going all the way to the left. All right, so once you know that line of the pattern is covered, you can go to the right and continue to fill in. Now that the wall is completed, we'll move on to the roof. The few times I've stitched this, I have found that 3 rows of back split stitches is sufficient. When I tried 4, it looked a little too bulky, but depending on how close you make your rows, you might need that 4th row. So let me show you how to do it. I'm going to turn my piece so that I can see the lines a little bit better. It's just easier to work more in this direction than trying to go horizontal with it looking right at me. So as you may have noticed, there aren't really lines for the ending of this roof. That's because I want it to look a little more natural. I don't want your lines to necessarily start in the same spot every time you make these rows. So that way it just gives it a little more of an organic look. So I'm going to start right here. And I'm going to make a back stitch about this big. Okay, now I need to split that stitch. So I'm going to come half a stitch length forward. So that's half of what this size is, roughly. And I'm going to go halfway in between that previous stitch. And that's the back split stitch. Okay, I'm going to just keep doing that until I have filled up this whole first row here. So I have completed the first row here, and now I'm going to make my second row. Earlier, I think I said 3 rows, but I'm definitely now thinking it was just 2 rows that makes the roof sufficient. And if you want a third row, you can. So because of that, 6 strands makes it so nice and thick that it really covers up a lot of space. So I'm going to make my next stitch here, and I'm going to give a little bit of room between those rows because, again, that floss really spreads out a lot because of the 6 strands. So I have that first back stitch, and now I'm going to go halfway in front of it and make a back split stitch. And as you see, that first stitch covered that top roof line, so the 2 rows really should be sufficient for my situation. If you're putting your stitches really close together, you might again need that 3rd row. All right, so I have my 2 rows, and I'm not sure why this has happened to me every single time I've stitched this piece, but I must accidentally go down a little here on the left, but I always notice there's a little bit of a gap right there. So I'm just going to add a little stitch right there and split it into a stitch in front of it. So it's not just a back stitch, but actually is splitting into something else, and just fill in that little gap. Alrighty. So once you have finished your stable, you are done for day 8. Come back tomorrow and we will work on our big star right here in the middle. See you then.